This is the Todd Shapiro Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.
Hey, one of our favorite guests on the show, a very, very intelligent guy and knows everything there is to know in the cannabis space. Please welcome to the program, Lance Lambert. Hi, Lance.
Hey, how you doing, Todd?
Good, man. Good. Whereabouts are you now?
I am back home in Southern California. I actually flew in from Heathrow last night, so glad to say I'm back in the Pacific time zone and in beautiful weather in Southern California. Although it was very comparable weather over there, it was anywhere from 19 to 25 C out there in England. So it kind of felt like home when I was there.
Oh, that's so great, man. Nice to have good weather in Heathrow in L.A. In London, it rarely happens that way. It's just nice to fly out when it's not a thunderstorm is what I like, or big rain, heavy rain.
Exactly. Always wonder in the back of your mind if you're going to make it from A to B.
What about you? Yeah, does everyone do that? I think everyone does that. You get on an airplane, you're like, oh my God, is this the last time anyone's going to see me again? It's weird. Like, I feel like that's a thought that like 95% of people on airplanes have.
I think so, yet nobody says it. It's just like it's faux pas to use the B word when you're in queue for security. You just don't say anything to do with bomb. It's going on in your head, but you never say it out loud. So
yeah, it's like it's really weird. The airplane, the initial takeoff, that feeling. Yeah, it's funny, and a lot of people don't talk about that. But I honestly think that. I think that I would say I'm putting out a conjectural number that 95% of people think about dying when they get on an airplane. You don't think that way when you hop in a car.
Yeah, that's a higher risk, right? That's the one thing a lot of people don't know. It's still the safest means of transportation over train, transit, automotive, bicycle. So just something to keep in mind, folks. So if that is crossing your mind, know that it is very safe, unless you're on a 737 MAX from Boeing, which is still grounded due to some glitches in their onboard systems. So, but we digress. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the cannabis industry, as always, man. So
yeah, man. Well, we need some good news because, if you're an investor, you're sitting there going, what the heck is going on right now? It is taking a beating, and I mean a beating. The top big companies just getting crushed, from Aphria to Canopy Growth to Aurora, you name it. We're looking for big catalysts. We're looking for big news. And I think people are getting afraid, but they're forgetting that as we break these boundaries in obviously your part of the world in the United States, that's really going to help the industry move forward, I think. So Utah moves to scrap the state-run pot dispensary system. What's up with that?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So, we're very much a supporter of Question 2, Yes on 2, which occurred last time they voted in 2018. And, we knew Utah was going to do things a little differently. The thing that they had originally proposed via legislation was that they would actually have a state-run medical marijuana dispensary system. But county attorneys out there said that it would put the public employees at risk of being prosecuted under federal drug laws. So they decided, like a vast majority of legal states and in the U.S., they decided to go ahead and keep it privatized. So it does sound like they're going to have approximately a dozen private dispensaries throughout Utah. Definitely not the largest state in the union. So it makes sense for them to not go overboard. And I think that really gives these dispensary owners a true opportunity to be successful, because that's one thing that has been a little bit of a challenge in larger states, California, Colorado, Washington, where you just get to a point of saturation with too many dispensaries, too many options, and only strong survive scenario.
And then moving to different countries now, lots of news going on across the world, and Thailand turning illegal cannabis into medicine. What?
Yeah, I want to talk about this. So this is something that, again, it occurred over the holidays between Christmas and New Year's. Both Thailand and South Korea announced a medical program for the new year, and they didn't waste any time. So Thailand actually released 180,000 doses of cannabis just a few weeks back. But one thing that came up in the news more recently, thanks to our friends at Grizzle.com, they actually shared that police seized more than 1,000 kilos from criminal gangs this week, and they passed it on to the Department of Thai Traditional Alternative Medicine. And this Department of Medical Sciences is actually going to process it, and they figure it will yield about another 600,000 bottles of cannabis oil for the domestic medicinal market. So that is something that is, I think, phenomenal news, right? To make something good out of bad, to try to transition the industry from the illegal and illicit to the legal market. And, of course, they're going to screen it and make sure everything's on the up and up before processing. But I think that's just a smart way of moving things forward in this legal world. So that was great news to hear coming out of Thailand.
Man, so it's really interesting news, and would that blow, like, if you were if you were from Thailand, like, for instance, we from Canada, we go, oh my goodness, you remember like 25 years ago, we'd had to go around the corner from that auto factory, and by when they start to hear news like this, because they've been much more strict on it criminally, right?
Yeah, they definitely are. That's one thing that took me a little bit by surprise, because I do traditionally every year kind of look at the tea leaves and tarot cards and go, okay, where's the next opportunity? Where are things expanding as far as plausibility of legalization? And quite honest, Asia was lower on the list in general. You look at other continents, obviously North America, thanks to Canadians, thanks to Mexico as well, we're moving in the right direction. The U.S. is coming on, again, state by state, not federal, as we discussed. But North America is in a good place. South America, several countries down there have legalized both adult and medical. So that's in a good place. Africa is moving in a great direction. We've talked about production in Kenya and Zimbabwe, how it's legal in South Africa. So they're in a good spot. So Asia was at one place that we didn't think would come up so quick. But to hear that they are moving forward and things are going on so progressively and quickly, it's great. So, but there is still places. Don't go to Singapore. I mean, you technically can get a ticket for chewing gum on the street as a resident. So it is a place that is a lot more strict when it comes to illicit drugs. And that's why they're one of the lowest when it comes to cities, states, and countries that consume cannabis. So don't feel comfortable in consuming or taking any cannabis to Asia just yet. It is very few countries in that region of the world.
No, I think you should bring suitcases full over whenever you go anywhere. That's my advice to you.
You can CBD. We've talked about China, number one producer and exporter of hemp. So, it's interesting. And a lot of people obviously can't distinguish. We've had plenty of issues down here in the States with different municipalities and different federal agencies that just don't know the difference. And it does typically have to be tested. But, yeah, I don't know if I do suitcases, so I'd hold out.
Yeah, and my disclaimer here is don't take anything I say seriously, people. Okay, the back to the extraction out of China and stuff, and we see that a lot with the hemp base and CBD oils and stuff. Is that getting more regulated over in that part of the world, or is it still kind of, I guess, just people are doing whatever they want to do, and you don't really know what's in there?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's something that I came across. I do love going out to these markets and visiting and seeing what's going on at the street level and really getting to hear what's trending, what's not, what's hot, what's not. And just kind of going back to the UK really quick, I did come across people that, again, this is the other side of the market, but did have concentrates. The majority of them were BHO or butane based concentrates versus ethanol or CO2 extraction. So that is something that is common. Unfortunately, if you are in an unregulated market, you don't know exactly what you're consuming and what the purities or impurities are there. So, but it is something that's common. CBD is very popular, CBD and hemp. We know it's blown up in North America, but that was definitely a hot topic, again, over there in the UK. And a lot of those individuals that were visiting the expo that I was at this past weekend were also coming over from mainland Europe. So hemp is hot. I mean, a lot of oils, a lot of concentrates that people are coming around to, just because it has been around, right? It's rather it be tied to religion or just tradition and culture of different groups. That's something that has been a common derivative, but is just in the limelight now. So it's becoming more readily available and more common as we see it out there. So it's kind of interesting.
And that's sort of going on what we're seeing in Ireland right now, where there's, I guess, a number, and this is from your notes, so I know this, but it leads to our great conversations here, Lance Lambert from BovedaInc.com. Yeah. There's a lot of sort of hemp licenses being applied for, and they're soaring, and I guess they're going to start really exploding in the cannabis crop side of things.
Yeah, that's something, Ireland really, they were having some issues on the legal side. Specifically more so on the THC and, again, the medical aspects and attributes of that side of the plant. But for hemp, things have been moving forward, and it's interesting because you have the Health Products Regulatory Authority out there, HPRA as it's known, And they actually have hit an all-high mark for license applications in individuals wanting to start growing cannabis crops. So they received 77 license applications as of July 2019 this year. Now, you compare that to all of 2018, where they only had 24 applicants, and then 2016, where they had just 7. So now there's almost 1,000 acres of registered cultivation for crops of hemp out there, and obviously that's a form of cannabis, so we still count it. But it's expected to rise to as much as 5,000 acres. Now, that's not huge numbers, but also keeping in mind, anyone that's familiar with the Emerald Isle, it's not a large island per se. I mean, I've driven across from Shannon out by County Clare to Dublin in about 4.5 hours. So it's not a substantially large landmass, but still, this is great information to hear that they're moving forward and getting things to a better place. And they're expecting, just in rural Ireland, this movement to create over 80,000 jobs. I think that's phenomenal, because that is something that has been a challenge in recent years for Ireland as far as employment levels go. So they've got the right soil. They've got an ideal climate, especially for cultivating hardy crops. So best of luck to them, and glad to hear they're moving in the right direction.
You know, cannabis just might save the world from a recession.
I think so. You know, that's something, again, I've been talking to several people and just kind of watching what's going on. You brought up the stocks. I mean, that is a really good point, Todd. Traditionally, over the last 3 years, the time that we've kind of most commonly seen that dip in stocks, as far as those that are legally traded, both on the Toronto and U.S. Stock Exchange, tied to this industry, it's usually been around January. And there's typically been an outside influence that's caused that flux or drop in the stocks. It is kind of interesting to see this occurring, though, right now. And I believe it's a little bit of a precursor. You know, we look at in the States here, just picking on real estate for a minute, usually that's a 7 to 10 year cycle. We've kind of hit the end of that cycle going back to our recession in 2009. We're at that point where something's going to change and something's going to give. And you need to keep an eye on certain things like gold. Right now, the value of gold has hit an all-time high in recent years. And I think that really just shows us that, you know, when people are kind of concerned about what's going on with stocks and in those little more volatile situations, they kind of pull back to more of a sure thing. And so not sure what's going to happen in the next year, but I do think cannabis will definitely help and benefit. I mean, again, it's already supplied over 217,000 jobs here in the U.S. alone. So I think it is going to be a help.
It's really interesting to say that I called my financial advisor today, and I was like, hey, do we own any gold? And you know, 5% of the portfolio owns gold, but I was like, I think we need to buy more gold. It's funny that how
Not
that
a
works.
bad idea.
Yeah, man.
Play it safe, my friend.
It's definitely a really interesting time right now. But the cannabis sector across the world are going to create lots of jobs. And here we are now on how even in South Africa could unlock billions, correct?
Yeah, it is huge. I'm so happy to hear about what's going on in South Africa. Specifically, South Africa has really been the leader as far as forward thinking with respect to the industry on the continent of Africa. Now, a lot of people kind of forget, I mean, Africa is not by any means a small continent in itself as well. I mean, you're talking about over 50 countries, population surpassing 1.4 billion cumulatively. So there is a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of potential there as well. But the one story that came out from our friends at Business Tech is the fact that this could actually unlock over 107 billion rand, and that is obviously a substantial amount. So hearing what's going on down there, you know, reading about what the international experts are saying about what's going on in South Africa and Africa as a whole, I think it's just phenomenal, again, that we're seeing an increase. And it's interesting because if you look at that specific country, only about 3.5% of the population consume the product. And talking to a friend who is in South Africa, he said, you know, it's always been associated with a little bit of a lower class. So while the upper class typically do the liquors and you know, the finer things, they kind of look down their noses at cannabis, and it actually goes for relatively little money. I mean, we're talking about $1 to $2 a gram retail in some instances. So it's kind of a different dynamic with respect to the plant there compared to every other continent that has been known to consume cannabis over the years. So I think it's going to be interesting what's going on. But again, the fact that they can grow that crop, it's a great climate. That's home of Durban poison. That's when we talk about landrace strains like we have before. That's not just a coincidence that Durban poison is called Durban poison. It does come out of Durban, South Africa. So the big thing that's going to be a win for them, though, is sorting out the legalese around exportation. So that is, I think, the goal for South Africa is similar to Israel, is to send this off to countries like Germany that have a medical program or Portugal that have a medical program. So I think that's one thing that's going to be a benefit of what they do. And they're very keen on related products. That's something they've done for some time, like hemp and oils and the rest of it as well. So again, that's something that I think more people need to keep an eye on. Don't forget about Africa.
Are there companies that you know of out of there right now? Are there any publicly traded companies in that space?
So there are. This is the one thing that's funny. I think I've talked about this before. I always joke around about every country I go to, I run into Canadians. And I mean that in a good way, but that is one place that, just like, again, South America, several countries in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, there are a few publicly traded Canadian companies that are looking into partnerships down in South Africa. It's a little different play down there, right? So it's not so much a church and state. It really is beneficial to reach out to the government and talk about how you can work on programs and offerings as far as doing business in South Africa. So that's why some of the companies that are publicly traded are looking to take the right approach and invest wisely in that opportunity, because I don't think it's a bad thing. Look, I mean, it's for the government to be a part of it and to make sure that it's a success and to make sure that there's accountability and trackability to the taxation and the employment that's tied to this industry. I think it's a good thing. So definitely, if you do a little Google, little search, you'll find a couple of companies that are tied specifically to that country.
Are people, a little bit down in general, or a bit afraid because of the markets? What's going on? Or are we still waiting for we keep talking about the positive news. That's what I like. A lot of people I know in the industry sort of talk about the negative news, because it's a stock price, and they're not just sort of focused on all these wonderful catalysts that we spoke of today. But I mean, is there still sort of optimism if you take your mind away from the markets?
Yeah, I think so. That's something that, look, there was several individuals, again, from across Europe, but also individuals from North America, Canada, and the U.S., respectfully, that were at this event last weekend. And that was not a hot topic. It wasn't what's going on with stocks back home, what's going on with the publicly traded companies. Those of us who have been in the industry for years, we've recognized that there is ebbs and flows, just like any other category, quite honestly. Industries always have their ups and downs. It happens to .com and startups when they go IPO. It happens to the automotive manufacturers, real estate. So I think that, not to say we've been desensitized, but we are optimistic about the industry overall and do feel that there is going to be a bounce back. Having said that, I am a little apprehensive, though. There's some companies out there that it does remind me of the .com days where you had 60, 70, 75x valuations. And that in itself gives me a little bit of concern, because if you are obviously saying that your whole company value is subsequently more than, definitely a higher multiplier than most of what your cash positive or what your income is, that's where it gets a little iffy. So I will be interested to see how much the market normalizes as legalization continues and it just becomes, again, a post-prohibition conversation around the world at some point.
Yeah, no, it'd be really interesting to find out what happens from here, and maybe a bit of a dip. And you'd imagine that, like those tech days, though, the true and real ones survive and thrive.
Yeah,
and kind of the players don't really go anywhere. So I've always told people, be careful where you put the money. There's a couple companies I still really believe in, and I never can give financial advice, but I'm not going to lie. You're looking at a company even like Canopy Growth today, flirting around 31 Canadian, going, oh my goodness, maybe now's a good time to jump back in. Who knows? Could it go down to 28, 26? Yeah, it's really hard to tell. I still love the company True Leave out of Florida, and they're expanding, and they have massive revenues, and that's cheaper than its IPO. There's certain companies that, and again, I don't give financial advice, but I always tell people stuff I like. And even there's some companies I work with, and those aren't any of them, but whose stock I do own as well. And, you know, I'd always full disclosure about that. So, you know, there's biased opinions there, but everyone's got to do your due diligence. But you got to think that at the end of the day, these big companies with still a lot of cash and great management teams and stuff, and just really spending a little bit more than they're making right now for brand awareness, will ultimately, I think, come out of it.
I agree. That's, you know, you don't expect. And if we do continue to compare it to .com, which I think is fair, a lot of those companies do have substantial burns and did have substantial burns. You look at, let's pick on Facebook, which is easy to do. Not a huge fan, but Facebook was burning all the way up until post-IPO. A lot of people don't realize so many companies are in the red even before they go public and sometimes after they go public because they are building that brand, that reputation. There's a lot of money going into R&D. One thing that specifically for Canadian investments that I'd remind people is how much R&D is going into, and a lot of these companies are amidst working on right now, how much is going into concentrates? Because keep in mind, again, on the anniversary coming up October 17th, all of a sudden there is going to be that release of allowing concentrations, and it's going to be specifically around topicals and oils and elixirs. And so I know in edibles, and I know several companies that I've talked to in the industry are like, yep, we're working on formulas now, and we're coming up with a new brand for a cookie or a new brand for a drink. So just be patient with them. Everything will even out, and to your point, the strong will survive for certain.
Well, it'll be interesting to find out what happens from here. Well, Lance, we'll always have these catch-ups every week, and we enjoy them thoroughly. So I guess we'll next Monday, actually, it's a holiday in Canada, so maybe we'll stick to the Tuesday thing if that's okay for you. We'll get Bilal to reach out.
It is, and you know what? I'm very happy to share for once. It's a holiday in the States next Monday as well. So for every 4 you have, we have one, evidently.
That and Christmas. Okay, my man.
There you go.
Thanks so much. Glad you're home safe from London, and look forward to catching up with you next week. Wonderful talk. BovedaInc.com, BovedaInc, hashtag Boveda Cannabis. And at Boveda Cannabis, again, they don't touch the plant, but they keep it very, very, very fresh, and lots of education and lots of knowledge and information on their website as well, including their own little podcasts and videos that they do too. Thank you so much, my man.
Thanks, I appreciate it, man.
Okay, Lance Lambert, everyone at 805 Lance as well.
This is the Todd Shapiro Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.